Welcome to Twilight Fables, where classic tales take a darker turn. Tonight, we climb the tower, but the girl in the window is no damsel, and the braid she drops is more than golden hair. Settle in and listen closely. They say she was locked away for her beauty, that her hair spilled from the tower window like sunlight, long enough to reach the forest floor, strong enough to carry a man's weight, that she sang to the moon and wept for freedom until a prince heard her sorrow and climbed to her salvation. But that's not the story carved into the bark of the dead trees that encircle her tower like gravestones. The forest knows the truth. The tower was not built to contain her. It was built to feed her. She was never the prisoner. She was the curse. The witch they call Rapunzel lives at the centre of a decaying wood known only as the Hollow Grove, a place where birds fall silent and roots grow in tangled knots like veins under dead flesh. Travellers don't map the Hollow Grove anymore. Those who do vanish, not all at once. Some leave behind boots, others only teeth. It is said that when the sun bleeds low, and the wind carries the scent of violets and rotted flesh, a golden braid descends from a window high above the trees. It coils and sways gently, as if waiting. It is always waiting. The boy's name was Wren, 17, thin as a stalk of barley, face still flushed with the warmth of boyhood and the ache of something braver. His village had spoken of the tower all his life, of the maiden inside, of the curse, of the witch. Depending on who told it, Rapunzel was a helpless victim or a demon in human skin. Wren didn't care. He had something to prove. He left before dawn, the mist still thick on the grass. No one stopped him. No one ever did. The villagers didn't want to know who the tower took. They just wanted it to be someone else. Wren found the Hollow Grove before sunset. It wasn't hard. The forest pulled at him. Vines curled across his path like skeletal fingers. Trees leaned inward, as if whispering secrets to one another. He followed the path of silence, where no bird sang and no squirrel dared to run. His breath grew colder with each step. Then he saw it, the tower. It was taller than any tree, with stones the colour of ash and windows like hollow eyes. The braid spilled down its side like molten gold, glowing faintly in the gloom. It pulsed, barely perceptible, like something breathing. Wren didn't hesitate. He grabbed the braid, and it curled around his wrist like a serpent. Inside the tower, Rapunzel stirred, not with surprise, with hunger. She had felt him the moment he stepped into the grove. Every root and stone in the forest was an extension of her will. Every tree bent to her breath. He was young, brave, the kind that tasted like ripe fruit and candlelight memories, the kind that clung. She moved to the window slowly, her bare feet soundless on the cold stone floor. Her hair, long and impossibly golden, snaked behind her, writhing like worms in moonlight. The boy was climbing now. Good. She tilted her head and whispered to the braid, and it tightened slightly, just enough to draw a wince from the climber. The tower fed on anticipation. The pain would make the taste sweeter. Wren climbed with determination. The hair was smooth, warm, even welcoming, like silk soaked in blood. His arms ached, his chest heaved, but when he reached the window, he gasped, not from exhaustion, but from what he saw. She was beautiful, of course she was, tall, pale, eyes like spilled ink. Her hair was not golden, it was gold itself, flowing in molten rivers across the stone floor. Her skin was untouched by time. Her smile curved like a scythe. "Welcome," she said, voice as smooth as warm milk. "You came for me." "I did," he breathed. You're real." Her laughter was low, musical. "Yes, I am." He stepped inside the room. The braid coiled behind him, slipping away from the window. The tower sealed its throat. There would be no climbing down. She gave him wine. He drank. She touched his hair. He shivered. They spoke, or he did. She only listened, tracing his thoughts as he spilled them like wine across her stone floor. His mother, his fears, his loneliness, his hopes. The tower grew warmer, closer. The walls whispered. The braid slithered up the walls and across the ceiling, slowly thickening, pulsing, listening. She leaned in, her lips near his ear. "You don't know what I am, do you?" Wren blinked. The room dimmed. Her face was so close now. "You're Rapunzel," she smiled. "No, Rapunzel was a story. I'm the one who tells it, again and again. And now," her voice dipped, "you're part of it." He tried to stand. He couldn't. His legs were numb. His arms trembled. The wine in his veins had turned to smoke. The braid moved then. It snapped forward, coiling around his ankles, another strand around his throat. He gasped, not from pain, but from the feeling, the sensation of being pulled apart, slowly, memory by memory. "Don't worry," she whispered, cradling his face. "You'll live on, in the braid, in the whispers." She kissed his forehead. He screamed, not from pain, but from realization. He wasn't dying. He was unraveling. Beneath the tower, the forest shifted. Another golden strand spilled from the window, gleaming, fresh, warm. And once again, the braid waited. And once again, the forest held its breath. The braid slept, not like a serpent in the sun, but like something buried, something dead. In the hours after Wren's screams had faded, the hair went still, soaking in what it had taken. The tower exhaled, slow, like stone sighing under weight, and the window blinked closed, not with shutters, but with tendrils of hair that wove themselves into a lattice. The hollow grove was still, but not silent. Deep within the tower, below the hollow chamber where Rapunzel entertained her guests, there was a spiral staircase carved from bone-white stone. Each step hummed faintly, like a plucked harp string. No dust, no cobwebs, no life, only echoes. Rapunzel descended barefoot, her gown of woven hair trailing behind her, twisting as if alive. Her hands touched the wall. It pulsed back. She smiled. The room at the bottom was round, with no visible door. Only a massive mirror hung on a wall made of hair, thick, knotted, pulsing softly in the dim light cast from a chandelier of glass teeth. The mirror was not made of silver or glass. It was made of scalps, layer upon layer, stitched and lacquered until the surface shimmered with trapped memory. 100 girls, 100 lives. Their voices murmured from within, sometimes crying, sometimes laughing. Tonight, they whispered her name, Rapunzel. She tilted her head. You were quiet tonight, she murmured. A ripple passed across the mirror, then a face emerged. Not hers, Wren's, eyes wide, mouth open, a breath caught in an eternal gasp. He mouthed something, a question, a scream. She touched his reflection gently. The glass rippled like water. You'll learn, she whispered. They all do. The mirror trembled. Then came the others, faces swimming just beneath the surface. A child with braided pigtails, a woman with sun-darkened skin and fury in her eyes, a prince, a priest, a thief, all taken, all remembered, not because she chose to, because the braid kept them. There was a time she had a name, a real one, not one spun from folklore and spit into lullabies to scare children. Long ago, before the tower, before the forest chose her, she had been mortal, small, breakable. Her mother died screaming in childbirth. Her father sold her hair to travelling merchants for dye. She bled every month, even before her body had time to bloom. But the hair always grew back, thicker, heavier, alive. It wrapped around her ankles when she tried to run, slithered across her throat when she screamed. It never let her leave, not until she stopped fighting, not until she fed it. The tower wasn't built by hands. It grew, sprouted from the soil of the hollow grove like a cancer. Its roots sank deep into the bones of those buried beneath. Its stones weren't quarried. They were calcified regrets, soaked in sorrow and cemented by time. She didn't live in the tower. She was the tower. And the braid. The braid was her tongue. Back in the village, 3 days passed. Wren's mother wept. His father drank. No one entered the hollow grove to search. They never did, but rumours bloomed like mould. She sings through the trees, someone whispered. I saw golden thread in the well water, said another. The baker's daughter claimed she dreamed of Rapunzel's face, only it had no mouth, and her hair crawled like worms. Then came the boy. Another, not from the village, but a merchant's son from the south. He'd heard the tale of the tower, the braid, the beauty imprisoned. He smiled when they warned him. I like a good challenge. He brought rope, knives, salt in his boots, and a secret in his blood. Rapunzel saw him long before he crossed into the hollow grove. His steps shook the moss. His presence disturbed the birds. She tasted something new in the air, fear, expectation, she stood at the tower's window and let the braid spill down again. This time it shimmered darker, as if soaked in something thick and unseen. Below, the boy looked up. He was not like Wren, not bright-eyed or trembling. His hair was black as pitch, and his skin glowed like firelight under the canopy. His hands were wrapped in cloth, but not to protect them, to bind something beneath. He stared up at her. "You're not a prisoner," he said. She smiled. "You're not a fool." He grabbed the braid. It quivered. She felt it, the resistance. And for the first time in 100 years, the braid hesitated. Inside the tower, the mirror began to hum. The scalps tightened. The whispers grew louder. Rapunzel turned to it, frowning. Her hair tensed like muscle. Something about this boy. Something about his blood. The braid began to pull, slower than usual. The boy climbed without fear. He whispered things to the braid as he rose. Strange things, old things, words in a language older than the hollow grove. She stepped back. The tower groaned. The chandelier of teeth rattled, and the braid began to shed. It dropped him just short of the window. He didn't fall. He hovered, suspended in midair, eyes locked with hers, hands glowing through the wrappings. "You've taken too much," he said. She hissed. The tower trembled. "You're a child. I'm the last name on your braid." He flung his hand forward, and the mirror shattered, not with glass, with screams. They poured out of the walls, the floor, the ceiling. The tower convulsed, hair lashing like tentacles in every direction. The faces in the mirror spilled from its cracks, forming ghosts with hair for limbs and empty sockets where eyes once wept. The boy stepped inside the window and placed a single iron nail on the stone floor. Rapunzel staggered. "You don't know what you've done," she whispered. "I do," he said. "I've cut your story, but stories don't die so easily. And witches only change shapes." The tower bled, not blood, but hair, dark, twisted, snapping like cables in a storm. It poured from the walls, split from the seams of the stone, and unravelled from the ceiling like serpents writhing in flame. The chandelier of teeth had collapsed, and the floor was buckling beneath Rapunzel's bare feet. Still, she didn't move. She watched the boy. He stood in the doorway of her tower, as if he'd always belonged there, one palm still glowing, the other wrapped in cloth and tight as a seal. The iron nail at his feet hissed softly where it touched the stone. Her braid thrashed violently behind her. The faces in the mirror, now broken and weeping, howled, and still the boy did not flinch. "I don't remember your name," she said, voice lower now, thinner, a thread pulled too tight. "And I remember everything." "You wouldn't," he replied. "You didn't take it. My sister climbed your braid 10 years ago." She blinked. Faces spun through her mind. Pale girls, Brown-eyed girls, screaming girls, laughing girls, too many strands. But something was familiar, a lullaby, a voice in the dark that never stopped humming. He pulled a token from his coat, a braid of hair, short, burnt at one end. She sang to me in my dreams, he said. She's buried inside you somewhere. Rapunzel's lips curled. Buried, yes, but not dead. The braid surged toward him. He did not dodge. Instead, he held up the iron nail and drove it into the floor. A pulse rippled outward. The hair stopped mid-air, hovering, frozen, as if caught in amber. Every strand in the tower quivered. A long, low groan echoed from the stone, like the howl of a creature waking in pain. The boy stepped forward. "You've fed too long on others," he said. "Time to cough up what you stole." She screamed, not from fear, but rage. Her hair lashed backward, ripping through the walls. Vines burst from the stone, curling into hands, teeth, hooks. "You think you can unravel me?" she hissed. "I am not thread. I am not." He reached into the pouch on his hip and drew out something silver, a comb, old, bent, and blackened along the teeth, a family heirloom. "Do you know what this is?" he asked, voice like steel in a winter wind. "She used it every night until you took her." Rapunzel's jaw trembled. The braid moved again, but slower now, uncertain. The comb glowed faintly as he raised it. "She called you by name." "No one remembers my name," Rapunzel spat. "She did." He stepped forward again, and the tower shivered. The hair began to retreat, just slightly. The golden strands darkened at the edges. They thinned, wilted, became brittle as old grass. Rapunzel staggered, clutching her sides. Her breath came sharp and fast. "You don't understand. If you pull one thread, everything unravels." He raised the comb and combed the air. The gesture wasn't symbolic. The comb moved through space like it was slicing silk, and the tower screamed. Below them, the roots of Hollow Grove twisted. Trees began to crack and fall in slow, thunderous echoes. Vines curled into smoke. The sky outside turned the colour of bruises. Inside the tower, the mirrors shattered again. This time, not with screams, but with names. One by one, they spilled into the air. Elspeth, Marion, Noma, Delia, Tansy. Names Rapunzel had forgotten or hidden. Now they wrapped around her like chains, tangling in her hair, clinging to her arms, pressing against her throat. She dropped to her knees. "I didn't mean to," she whispered. "I didn't want to." The boy stood over her. "Then let them go." The tower began to collapse. Not with fire, not with fury, with release. Stone became bark, hair became ash, and the rootwork beneath the structure began to tear free from the forest floor like bones being exhumed. Voices filled the air, high, clear, endless. A spiral of souls twisting upward like a braid undone. The boy stepped back. He watched her come apart, but not die. She wasn't mortal enough to die. When the tower finally fell, the forest went silent. The birds did not return. The animals did not stir. Only the trees remained, hollow, black, smoking where the roots had burned. The boy stood among the ruin, braid in one hand, comb in the other. His sister's voice was gone now, but not lost. He felt her settle into the quiet of his bones. He would carry her name. That was enough. As he turned to leave, something rustled behind him. He froze. Then, from beneath the ash, a single hand emerged, delicate, long-fingered, hair still trailing from the wrist-like veins. It wasn't attacking. It simply waved, not in farewell, in promise, because witches do not die. They wait, and Rapunzel had all the time in the world. The hollow grove was gone, or rather, it had shifted. Where once a cursed tower pierced the sky like a needle of bone, there was now only a clearing, choked in ash and silence. No animal stirred, no wind moved the branches. The earth was pale and dry, as if even rot had abandoned it. The boy, whose name no one ever asked, because names carried weight, walked the ruined path alone, the braid of his sister still wrapped around his wrist. He did not look back, but something followed him, far behind, beneath the ash, beneath the soot, beneath the scattered stones of the fallen tower. Something pulsed, a heart, not one made of flesh or blood. This heart was a knot, dense, black, woven from centuries of pain and whispered promises. It twitched once, then again, and from it grew a single thread of golden hair, curling upward, reaching, not toward the sky, but inward, back toward the memories that once gave it shape. Rapunzel wasn't gone. She had only shed a skin. The boy came to the edge of the forest, where trees began to green again, and birds dared to sing. A creek murmured nearby. The wind smelled of moss and old stones. He knelt beside the water, unwrapping the braid from his wrist. He'd done what he came to do. The tower was broken. His sister's name had been spoken, her soul released, and yet he felt heavier. He stared at the braid. A part of him couldn't let go. The strands were soft, familiar. They reminded him of her voice, her lullabies, the way she smiled when they ran through the fields as children. He held it over the stream, hesitated, and heard a voice behind him. "You carry her well." He turned. There was a woman standing just beyond the tree line. Her skin was the colour of rain-washed stone. Her hair hung in long grey sheets to her knees. She wore no shoes. Her eyes were sewn shut with silver thread. Yet somehow she saw him. "Who are you?" he asked. The woman stepped forward slowly, like she moved through water. "I tend to what is buried," she said. "And you've pulled something into the light that should have remained underground." He rose to his feet, fists clenched. She was a witch. She stole lives. She deserved to be unmade. The woman tilted her head, and yet she wasn't. He swallowed. Why? She knelt beside the stream and touched the water. It rippled outward in a perfect circle. Because Rapunzel is not a who, she said. She is a what, a hunger, a story told so often it began to believe in itself. He didn't respond. She turned her stitched eyes toward him. You've cut down the tower, but the braid survives. His gaze dropped to the strand still in his hand. He realized now. It was longer, only slightly, but it had grown. Let it go, the woman said softly. He stared at the water, at the way the braid shimmered in his fingers. It was hard to describe, but he felt it calling, not in words, in memories. His sister's laughter, her tears, her warmth. I don't want to lose her again, he whispered. You never had her, the woman replied. Not after she touched the braid. The forest around them creaked. Above, clouds began to swirl. You must choose, she said, rising. Let it go, or keep it. But know this, a thread cannot stay coiled forever. It will unwind. It will find something to tie itself to. The wind picked up. The braid curled in his hand like a living thing. He made his choice, not with words, with fingers. He dropped the braid into the stream. It floated for a moment, peacefully. Then the current pulled it under. It vanished. The wind died. The sky cleared. The woman was gone. He stood there a long time. Eventually, he turned and began walking away from the hollow grove. But behind him, far beneath the forest floor, the knot pulsed once more. The braid was not gone, only following the current, looking for new soil, new roots, and a new girl with hair long enough to let down. The hollow grove had died, or at least that was the lie the villagers told themselves. No one ventured to the clearing where the cursed tower once stood. The boy, who never gave his name, returned only once, on the night of the first snow, to place a single stone where his sister's voice had last been heard. He never spoke of what he saw. He never spoke much again at all. Time moved forward. Children grew into adults. Stories became warnings. Warnings became myths. And beneath it all, the braid grew. It began like this. A sprout of gold, no wider than a worm, piercing the soil just where the tower once rose. No one saw it. No one would have believed it anyway. But the braid was alive. It had learned. It no longer waited to be climbed. It reached. In the village, a girl named Anja stirred in her sleep. She was no one special, at least by the village's standards. The blacksmith's niece, barely 16, thin and sharp-faced, with long brown hair she kept bound in a red ribbon. She was kind, quiet, and often lost in thought. She hummed lullabies without realizing it. Her parents were gone, taken by a fever that swept through the eastern wood 2 winters ago. She lived with her uncle, who cared for her in the way a hammer cares for an anvil, and lately Anja had been dreaming of hair. She first noticed it in the shadows, a glimmer at the edge of her vision, threads of gold that vanished when she turned. Then came the whispers, gentle, lulling, "Let it down," always in that same voice, female, familiar. She awoke one morning with a braid in her hands, long, golden, and warm. It was gone before she could scream. Her uncle scolded her for her nightmares, told her to stop frightening the neighbours. "No one believes in witches anymore," he said. "Not since the tower fell." But Anja wasn't sure, especially after she found the comb. It was buried behind the cottage. She'd been digging in the snow for carrots. Her fingers brushed metal, and when she pulled it free, she found a small silver comb, dull with age but warm to the touch, and inscribed along the edge in looping thorn script was a name, Rapunzel. Anja stared at it, fingers trembling. That night, she dreamed of a forest made of hair. The braid was closer now. It had threaded itself through the bones of the fallen tower, pushing up through the roots of the grove. It pulsed with memory, not just of the witch, but of every soul it had ever taken. And within that pulsing, something stirred. Not Rapunzel, something older, something that had only ever worn her name like a mask. Anja began to change. She stopped eating. Her hair grew longer each night, though she hadn't touched it with a comb in weeks. It curled around her neck when she slept. It whispered to her. Sometimes, she answered back. Her uncle grew afraid. He nailed shut the windows, kept the lights burning all night, slept with an iron poker beside his bed. But it didn't matter. The braid didn't knock, it slithered. One morning, Anja was gone. No one saw her leave. No footprints in the snow. No door creaked open. Her bed was empty. The sheets cold. Only the red ribbon remained, tied neatly around the comb on her pillow. And beyond the village, in the hollow grove, a tree had grown tall, very tall. Anja awoke at the base of that tree, or at least, she thought she did. The world felt soft around the edges. The air was warm and pulsing. The roots beneath her back throbbed like veins. Above her, the tree's golden veins pulsed brighter. Its bark split open, just wide enough for her to slip inside. She stood, and without fear, stepped into the tree. Inside was the tower, rebuilt, not in stone this time, but of hair and root, bark and bone. The walls pulsed with stolen breath, and at the top she found a mirror made not of glass, but of twisted braids. When she looked into it, she didn't see herself. She saw Rapunzel, smiling, not cruel, not kind, simply waiting. "You've come far," the reflection said. Anja shook her head. "This isn't real." The mirror rippled. "Neither was I, until someone believed me." Anja backed away, but the tower closed in. The braid began to hum. The roots twisted lovingly around her ankles, and she heard her own voice whisper, "Let it down." From that moment on, the hollow grove was whole again, But it was no longer dying, it was watching, and far away, the boy, now grown, woke in the night, hand clenching his wrist. The braid was gone, but he still felt it, still dreamed of gold, still heard his sister's voice echo in the trees. He wasn't finished yet. The man who had once been a boy with a braid around his wrist had not spoken the name Rapunzel in 10 years, but now it burned on his tongue. He tried to leave it behind, to bury it with the stories and the scream-stained memories of that cursed tower. He had no family left, no village to return to. The forests had changed, and so had he. Still, something had awakened again, a ripple in the weave, and last night it had called to him, not in a dream, in a voice. His sister's. He travelled north, along paths he no longer recognised. The roads had split and twisted over the years, overtaken by roots and time. Places where people once lived now stood empty, reclaimed by moss. He passed through one town where everyone he met had no hair. Men, women, children, bald as eggs. They wouldn't speak of it, only stared. One woman had whispered, "We made offerings. It wasn't enough." He left that town before nightfall. He followed the current of stories, tavern whispers, nursery rhymes, carvings in trees. One song caught his ear. In a marketplace where the air smelled of roasted almonds and candle wax, she lets it down, she lets it slide. A rope of gold you must not climb, for if you do, your name she'll take, and stitch it through the roots that wake. Children sang it in rounds, laughing. He did not laugh. He asked where they learned the song. They pointed east. He reached the new hollow grove in spring, but it didn't smell like spring. It smelled like rot beneath perfume. The trees leaned toward him, their branches knotted with strands of gold, too perfect to be real. The air shimmered faintly, like heat rising from a dead body, and at the centre of it all stood a tree that was no tree. It was the tower again, but this time it pulsed with life. It wasn't waiting to be climbed. It was alive. He did not call out. He did not reach for the braid. He walked in silence to the base of the tree and pressed his hand against its bark. It shuddered beneath his touch and whispered, "She's waiting for you." He closed his eyes and remembered his sister's voice. Then he spoke a different name, one no one had uttered in centuries. Althea. The forest howled. The ground buckled. Roots split open like mouths screaming. Hair flew from the treetops like smoke from a burning crown. The tree that was the tower began to twist, turning in on itself like a corkscrew of bones. And from the highest window, a girl leaned out. But it wasn't Anja anymore. Not really. Her hair was longer than any rope. Her arms were pale and threaded with veins of gold. Her eyes glowed like twin moons, and when she smiled it was with too many teeth. But her voice was Althea's, soft, wounded. "Brother?" He stepped forward. The braid uncoiled. He did not climb. He held up the silver comb, the one their mother had used when they were children, the one that had torn through knots and soothed the scalp after nightmares. He held it high, and it shone. "Do you remember this?" he asked. She stared at it, and something in her expression cracked. I remember. The teeth. It sang. "Yes," he whispered. "It's still yours." He placed it on the ground and stepped back. The braid recoiled. Smoke billowed from the tower's branches. The air rippled. Then came the shrieking, a sound like every name ever stolen screaming at once. From the base of the tree, a shape rose. Not Anja, not Althea, not Rapunzel. Something made of all of them. Something made of hair and grief and memory. A tangle of forms, limbs woven into limbs, mouths filled with braid, eyes weeping silk. The witch had returned, and she was starving. He did not run. He pressed his hands together and began to recite the names, one by one. The names that had been taken, names no longer spoken, names that belonged to the braid. Elspeth, Wren, Marion, Tansy, Delia, Althea. He said them like a prayer. Each word burned. Each word cracked the earth. The creature screamed. The tower bent. And then, at last, the braid snapped. Not just one. All of them. A million threads broke at once. Hair turned to ash. The tree burst from within, spewing light like a wound. And in that light, she was free. Althea, just Althea, a girl with tangled brown hair and a heartbeat. She fell into her brother's arms, and the hollow grove burned. But not everything dies when burned, and not every braid is made of hair. Some are made of words, and some stories, once untangled, only find new threads to begin again. The hollow grove was truly gone now, not sleeping, not waiting, gone. Its soil, once rich with the blood of 100 stolen names, had turned grey. The towering tree was no more than splinters and soot. The braid had burned. The knot had unravelled. The witch was dead, or so they prayed. The man, no longer a boy, carried his sister from the grove on foot. Her body was light in his arms, as if the years she'd lost had left her hollow. She slept the entire journey. He never once set her down. They found shelter in a chapel, long since abandoned, its walls choked with ivy and cracked stained glass. There, beneath a fractured painting of a saint, with golden hair and burning eyes, Althea awoke. Her eyes were no longer glowing, but they weren't entirely hers either. She sat up, slow and stiff. Her hair pulled around her like a forgotten tapestry. It no longer moved on its own, but it didn't feel inert. It felt like something remembering what movement once was. She looked at her brother. "Did it end?" she asked, voice raw. He didn't answer. Instead, he held out the silver comb. It was blackened now, half melted, the teeth warped. Still, she took it. Still, she wept. They stayed in the chapel for weeks. Each day, Althea remembered a little more, both of herself and of what had lived inside her. Rapunzel hadn't just spoken through her. She had woven herself into every cell. Even now, Althea couldn't untangle which thoughts had been hers and which had been stitched in by the braid. "Sometimes," she whispered one night, "I feel like I'm still dreaming, like I'm looking through her eyes." Her brother sat beside her, whittling a wooden comb from a fallen branch. His hands trembled. He'd stopped speaking her name aloud. He feared giving it weight. "Then we wake you up again," he said. But the world was already unravelling. It began in the west. A girl named Mila went missing from her cottage near the sea. Her family searched for days. When they found her, she was standing in the surf, hair trailing into the water like ink. She said a voice told her to follow the tide. Her hair grew 3 inches that night. The next day, she braided it without knowing why. In a distant city, a seamstress collapsed during market day. She'd been stitching a tapestry of a tower, though no one had asked her to. She said the design came to her in dreams. When they cut the tapestry from her loom, they found a braid sewn down the back of it, a real one, still warm. A merchant's wife delivered a child, born with hair that sang in the cradle. The melody was soft, repetitive, and the lyrics were always the same. "Let it down, let it down, let me weave into your crown." Althea felt every ripple, even in her sleep. The comb, now bound in leather and hidden in a cloth satchel, hummed against her chest like a second heartbeat. Her dreams bled into waking, and somewhere, far beneath the world, something braided in the dark. Not hair, not thread, words. One night, Althea woke gasping. "It's not over," she said. Her brother didn't need to ask why. He felt it too. The silence between them had deepened, not from lack of trust, but from shared dread. "We burn the forest," he said quietly. "But not the story," she replied. There was only one path left, not to destroy it, but to trap it, to bind the braid with a new thread, something older than hair, older than witches, older than grief, a name. They left the chapel and walked east, toward the great city of Atramar, where the scholars lived and the vaults were deep. There, beneath towers of parchment and stone, they hoped to find the first record of Rapunzel, not the story, not the fable, but the original name. If they could find it, they could bind it, thread the curse back into a name too ancient to speak aloud, seal the braid in silence. But they weren't the only ones searching. Far north, in a monastery carved into a cliffside, an orphan girl found a hidden door. Inside was a loom that spun on its own. At its centre, a golden spindle, dripping red. She reached out to touch it, and somewhere, something laughed. The city of Atramar was built on bones. White stone arches wound through the air like ribs. Bridges crossed over streets like veins. At the heart of it all stood the great archive, an ancient library carved into the cliffs, sealed with sigils that had outlasted kings. No fire had ever touched it, no curse had ever crossed its gate. That was why they came. Althea and her brother arrived at dawn, veiled in soot and silence, carrying only a satchel and a name they dared not speak. They were not given entry easily, but names have power, and they carried many. The keepers of the archive were old, not in age but in knowing. Their robes were stitched with ink-dipped thread. Their eyes glowed slightly in the dark. They did not blink. When Althea placed the satchel on the table and unwrapped the blackened comb, the chamber fell still. "You've been braided," one of the keepers whispered. Althea didn't flinch. "I was unwoven," the keepers conferred in silence, speaking through the tilt of their heads and the flutter of their fingers. Finally, one beckoned. "This way!" They were led below, past halls of silent scrolls and books bound in skin, past vaults humming with unsaid words, until they reached a chamber no candle could light. The air here was thick with memory. The walls pulsed like a buried heart. In the centre of the room was a pedestal, and on it a single spool of thread, not gold, not silver, ash white. It shifted as they entered, as if aware. "This," the keeper said, "is the first thread." Althea stepped closer. She could hear it humming, but not in sound, in feeling. The pain of first loss, the ache of unsaid names, the weight of longing that twists stories into knots. She knew this feeling. It lived inside her, and the thread pulsed in recognition. "Can it bind her?" she asked. The keeper nodded. "If you speak her name." "We don't know it." "You do," he said. "It's buried in the braid." That night, Althea dreamt of the tower again, but this time she stood outside it. She was a girl again, small, scared, holding a ribbon in her hands. She called out, "Rapunzel," and nothing came. She called again, but then she looked down at the braid in her hand, and she realised the tower hadn't grown around the witch. The witch had grown out of the braid. The name wasn't Rapunzel. That was just the thread it wore. She woke with a gasp, turned to her brother. "I know it." He sat upright. "Say it." She shook her head. "Not here, not yet." They returned to the pedestal. The keepers were waiting. Althea approached the first thread, and from the satchel she withdrew the comb. Then she spoke the name. Once, only once. The stone cracked. The thread unravelled itself from the spool, and from it rose a sound like wind through a field of bones. The air split. The archive shook. The braid, burned in the hollow grove, drowned in rivers, shredded in battle, began to gather. Across the world, every strand of cursed hair twisted toward Atramar. They slithered through roots, rivers, chimneys, graveyards. They spun through windmills and wells. They slipped from the mouths of statues and the spines of books, each one drawn to the sound of their true name. And when they reached the archive, they were bound, woven into the first thread, knotted into silence, sewn shut, sealed. The pedestal became a tomb, the thread a noose around the story's throat. Rapunzel was no more, not slain, not banished, just quiet. Althea fell to her knees. Her brother caught her. "I feel empty," she whispered. "No," he said, "you're just your own now." They left Atramar at dusk. The keepers never spoke of what occurred. The archive kept no record of that day. And the world, for the first time in centuries, forgot the braid. Children stopped singing the song. Hair grew duller. Stories lost their teeth. But Althea would never forget, nor would her brother, because every now and then, when the wind curled just right, they heard a whisper in the trees. "Let it down!" And they'd both tighten their braids and walk faster